listening to the Rainmaking Podcast, hosted by high-stakes headhunter, author, and professional speaker, Scott Love.
This is the Rainmaking Podcast, and my name is Scott Love. I'm your host and producer of this show, and welcome. If you're new, I want to invite you to go back and listen to some of the previous shows that we have. I try to cue it up where the title of the show is at the beginning, then you can see who the guest is. So if there's a topic that's interesting to you, feel free to listen to that. This has become quite an archive of experts, people that I get to know and meet, and I get to sit at the feet of experts on business development. So I appreciate that, all the lessons that I've learned here, and I hope you have also. I've kind of changed my style and my format, trying to make it a little bit more of value up front. So if you listen to it, if you don't get something in the first couple of minutes, I know people are just going to stop listening. At least that's how I am. I listen to podcasts. If I'm not getting anything out of it, I'm done. I'm going to move on to the next one. So my goal is to try to keep you here and keep you engaged. And our guest today is someone that's pretty special. His name is David Avrin. He's an expert and an author on marketing, on business development. His company is called the Customer Experience Advantage. He's a popular speaker. I've been following him for years, and his content is solid, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot on this show with him, and I've learned things from him over time. Remember to check out the show notes so you can connect directly with our guests that we have on here. The topic today is future-proofing your business in a world of uncertainty. David is a global speaker. He shares his content-rich and entertaining and actionable presentations with audiences all over North America and 24 countries all over the globe. I hope you get some great ideas from my friend David on this show. Thanks for listening. Hey, this is Scott Love. Thanks for joining me on the Rainmaking Podcast. Today we have a special guest. We have Dave Avrin, who's a friend of mine. He's an expert on the topic of marketing. And we're talking about future-proofing your business in a world of uncertainty. David, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Scott, it is great to be with you today.
Yeah, I've been following you for years. I think your content is solid. You've got great ideas that help those in business. And in business, you can kind of predict where the money's coming from, except in today's world, you just have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. And let me ask you this. In the world of uncertainty, looking over the last, I'd say probably over the last 15 months, 18 months, what have you seen are the biggest changes in the world of business development from your perspective as an expert on marketing?
Well, I think the biggest changes is the ones that everybody is seeing, which is our expectations have changed. Right? Our expectations for access and immediacy and speed of response, and almost to the point of being absurd and unreasonable, and only because we're being trained by other industries to expect it. I ask audiences as I speak, and I tell you, I say, anybody notice that your customers or clients are a little more demanding, a little more unreasonable? And of course, you have this look on everybody's face like, welcome to my world. Well, it's true. And don't blame the millennials. It's everybody. It's everybody, because we've kind of learned that we can. I mean, I get my groceries delivered. I would never have even thought about this pre-COVID, and it's awesome. But it's also, for the first time ever, Scott, we're being compared with industries that have nothing to do with what we do. We always had to be, one of the best and top tier, top 10% within our industry. But now we're being compared against industries and competitors who aren't competitors, like Amazon, right? And Postmates and Uber Eats and everything else. And when somebody says, well, we don't do overnight delivery, and well, everybody else does. Now, granted, we're talking mostly with professional service providers and others, but it really affects all of us. And this time has changed us.
That's an interesting point. Do you think, were there any similar parallels to what we've seen with COVID in previous economic recessions? Have you seen anything that's similar to what we're dealing with right now?
Well, I think the only thing we're seeing similar is a weeding out of lesser players. Even from an acquisition perspective or a merger, people were talking about looking for weak competitors. No, you look for great companies with weak owners. Right? People who didn't plan ahead, who weren't cash flow positive. And so I think the thing that we're seeing is a parallel to yesteryear when similar downturns in the economy happen, is there are people who are caught with their pants down economically from a cash flow perspective. And so we're seeing a lot of consolidation again. But post that, is we're seeing a very strong marketplace populated by very strong players,
right?
Who've been smart with cash, who made the pivots. Yes, I use the P word. And so coming out of this, we're actually seeing much stronger players than before because the weaker ones have been weeded out by and large.
That's interesting. I know when you look back from the time that you and I probably got into business, and I'm not going to say the date, but people can do the math. They can go to LinkedIn and
we got some gray hairs, my friend. Yeah.
You look at, you just don't know when that next natural or man-made crisis is going to happen. We had the housing crisis. We had the COVID crisis. They tried to put Joni Loves Chachi back on the air. You just don't know.
Very sad. Yeah, very sad.
You don't know what these catastrophes are going to be in the world, and you have to be prepared for that. And you mentioned this about 4 times since we started. You talked about cash flow, about cash reserves, about being cash positive. Obviously, you got to have that. So let's say we draw a line and we look forward. What do you think are probably the biggest lessons that we've learned from this crisis as we go forward in a world of uncertainty? What do you think are the things that should be top of mind with those who are in business?
Well, I think the only certainty is uncertainty. And I know that sounds really pithy and very meme-ish, but the reality is we have to be prepared for a downturn. People used to say before, you got to make sure you have 6 months or 3 months in the bank. We have to run business as if we're a Christmas store. And here's what I mean. If you've ever been in Michigan, there's a little town called Frankenmuth, which is literally Christmas town, USA. And everything they sell is Christmas ornaments and Christmas. And you look at any strip mall store that goes out of business, it becomes a Halloween store, within a day. They know when their revenue is coming in, and they have to bank that, and they have to hold that and prepare for times when business is slower. And I think the biggest lesson for many of us has been we can't count on what next year is going to be. Now, we can plan for it. Much of my business is consulting with companies and speaking for organizations to help them future-proof by understanding their changing customers.
Right.
But you also have to understand that the world could shut down because we've seen it happen. It's no longer pie in the sky. So are we prepared as an organization to modify our workforce schedule? Can we do remote, which we've learned that we can?
Right.
Are we diversifying into alternate revenue streams that if one stream completely shut down? Look at Boeing, look at some of the airline industry. Look what happened after 9/11, when things shut down for months and people scrambled to look at their core competency at an organization and say, who else values what we can do? Who with money could we potentially shift or pivot or sell to? So I think sort of this flexibility and this nimbleness, and those who were very good at it during COVID have a competitive advantage moving forward. And so no longer can we do the old Soviet style 5-year plan, what's going to happen in 5 years. Now it's what might happen in 6 months if something changed dramatically, if wars overseas shut down, if ransomware shut down our organization, do we have a plan B, C, D, and E? And it's very exciting for organizations and consultants who help companies create those alternate plans. But it's very important for all of us to recognize that we can't count on things. So we need to control what we can.
How do you think we can take what you said and focus that on client development in terms of getting business, in terms of how we operate, how we continue to pay the bills and continue to do business? I think you're obviously right about that. I think you've got to be smart about that. And you can't ever say what could possibly go wrong. And you can't say, I think
we got a good idea of that now, don't we?
Yeah, you can't say, I think the worst is over yet, because it could even get worse. And
from a rainmaking perspective, Scott, let's talk about that.
Yeah,
I think the important thing is, I think we're very clear and cognizant, and I don't want to be. Nobody wants to talk about COVID forever, but I talk about a post-COVID world.
Yeah,
we're very cognizant of what COVID meant for us. We know the early days of scrambling for the PPP and SBA disaster loans, and how do we keep our people engaged and keep them working to qualify for extra right? We're very cognizant whether you were deemed essential or not. Mm-hmm. What I talk about and what I want to talk about is what has COVID meant to your clients? What has changed in their world in terms of their access to capital, their struggles with staffing, their struggles with proximity. if we can better align ourselves, not just what we have traditionally offered as an organization, and I don't think anybody has to make a wholesale change unless they're in a very niche industry. Most of what we had that was valuable before will be valuable in the future. What's different is the changing world and lives and priorities of our clients. And those who can better align, as we're looking to sell and engage and contract with those who we have traditionally done or expanded during COVID, the winners are going to be those who really understand what's changed in the lives of their clients.
Right.
What new pressures do they have? What new constraints do they have from a structural or a staffing perspective? And if we can align our services and our offerings or expand our services and offerings to better solve those new and unique and modified problems, I think that's the magic formula right there. And a lot of people who have traditional business models, very successful business models, but they were created 5 years, 10 years ago, are going to be at a competitive disadvantage because clearly their clients have changed. The world has changed. How we access information and services has changed. And so you better have changed as well, or you better be well on that path if you're going to compete in the future.
That's right. What do you think about those listening to this, reaching out to their clients and talking about what's changed within their organizations about COVID? Do you think that's something that should be avoided, or do you think there's a way to possibly generate business from that conversation?
But that's the word right there, Scott. It's conversation.
Yeah.
It's not let's burden our customers with endless surveys about how we do after every transaction. That puts burdens on them. That puts the onus on them to reach out to help you and to take time out of their day. How do we engage in conversation? I think it's a lost art. There's so much conflict and there's so much painful discourse right now in the public marketplace, whether it's social media and others, that I remember when I was a kid, I remember I'd ask my dad, how much do you make for a living? How much do you make at work? He says, it's none of your business, right? That's what our parents back then, it was none of your business. And he wasn't trying to be mean. It was just, as he explained it, he said, there are just certain things you don't talk about in mixed company, right? That was the old line, mixed company. And it was religion and it was money. And he says, but we don't talk about things that highlight the differences. And if somebody doesn't make what we do or something else, it creates distance. And it was this wonderful philosophy. But now we talk about everything. We disagree with anything. You can post something online about how much you love golden retriever puppies, and you will be attacked from all sides for any number of reasons, just because we attack everybody. And so what we've done is we've pulled back, and there's things that we won't talk about. And what happens is we lose the knowledge that comes from conversation. We lose agreeing or disagreeing without being disagreeable. Right. And so I think it's so important that we reach out to our customers and clients and have conversations. What's keeping you up at night? Here's what's happened. Maybe we open with, here's what's going on with us. We just want to know what's going on with you. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I'm trying to better understand. Maybe it's virtual coffee. Maybe it's coffee in person. We also, by the same token, need to have those conversations internally. My most successful initiative that I launched during this time is called the Morning Huddle. And it's about sparking internal conversations. What's happening on the front line of your business? What are your clients asking for that we don't offer? What are they being frustrated when you see them, throwing up their hands going, unbelievable? What are things that they're asking for, saying, yeah, sorry, we don't do that? Is that being passed up the chain of command so that leadership can say, I don't know, is there sufficient demand to justify maybe offering that? Right. And so we've got our head down and we're working hard. And so from an acquisition perspective, the more we can understand that, and that comes from conversation, it doesn't come from over surveying your most important customers and clients.
You said a couple of things I want to hit on and kind of go back over. I liked what you said about remove the burden with our clients, engage in conversation, talk about what's keeping you up at night. And I also like the fact that you said, do that internally, have those internal conversations.
So important.
Let's say there's somebody who's listening and they hear this and like, man, that's such a great idea that Dave has. But I know that if I talk to my manager or the executive over our team, they're going to shoot it down. How do you think leaders of organizations, how do you think they should deal with this type of change? If this is something that they haven't done before, what do you think you would tell those people at the top? And even those people that are really within that type of group, how do they really get to that point where they need to make these changes?
Well, first, it's the acknowledgement that the biggest source of lost revenue for your company is the customer that you never knew about. right? Who was the one that right? They came in and they left without being engaged, or they called and they hung up because they didn't want to listen closely because your menu options have changed.
Yeah.
Or they went to their website and they got to your website, you got them there, and they clicked away and they never called, and you have no idea who they are. We have to really be honest with ourselves that we haven't created a cure for cancer that tastes like chocolate.
Yeah.
You may be good at what you do, but you're not that good. And so what I would say to leadership is we have to make space for internal conversation, not just for people to have ideas that may or may not get shot down, but just to come to you and say, by the way, this happened. Do you know I've gotten 9 requests in the last 2 weeks for blank, but we don't do it. And I just thought you should know. Are we creating space for that? Do you have a culture that, as you said, Scott, that doesn't shut down or shoot down great ideas internally?
Right.
People say, yeah, we have this great culture or an open door policy. And then somebody, right? And Marshall Goldsmith has great content on are we listening? Are we creating a safe space for conversation to happen? We know some of the best ideas come in that serendipity of that unexpected conversation in the hallway, or somebody dropping by your office and saying, hey, do you have a quick second? We lost much of that when they're all scheduled Zoom meetings. We lost the serendipity of the unexpected encounters in the break room, in the hallways. It's the same thing that we lost in conferences and conventions, is that unexpected. We know the greatest value oftentimes, and you and I are speakers and part of that world. It's the unexpected encounter in the hallways between the sessions.
Right.
And
That's right.
So even if you're virtual, or you've now created a hybrid model within your organization that includes a great measure of virtual, it's very efficient. It's not as effective, but it can be enough, and you can justify it. You have to put conversation on the calendar. We have to create some unscripted space and time to not just report what you're working on, but to just say what's going on. Or maybe it's a section of a meeting that says, tell me some unexpected encounters. Tell me some challenging things. I'm working with an insurance company, and their biggest challenge, I'm coming in to speak, I'm doing a half day with their whole team, and their biggest issue is the abuse that their customer service reps are taking on the phone by people thinking that every claim is worth $1 million because somebody on TV told them it was. And they said, really, that's our only issue. We can't keep people. Our people are taking horrific abuse. And they said, can you help us manage that and deal with that? And that came from conversation.
Yeah, interesting. I think you've got some great points here. Let me go over some of these, David, that you mentioned. And one thing that we've done within our company, I've got a small team, and each week we block out time where I kind of know what we're going to talk about. It's not structured as such, but let's talk about performance improvement. What are some of the issues you have?
Right.
And we kind of give that space. What are some tactical suggestions you would have for those in the business of getting business to really connect with their clients? Even what are some tips that you've seen that happen on the Zoom meetings that they have with them? Kind of, if you could bring it to a tactical level. And the reason I ask you that, because you've got some special expertise, because you talk to everybody. Everybody knows you. You're all over the world, and you're in all these different industries, and you've seen a lot, and you've got this wisdom that most people don't have and they could benefit from. What are some tactical suggestions that you would give to people about doing some of these virtual type connections with their clients?
Well, here's one part that I think drives all of us mad. And I know that this podcast needs to be a bit evergreen, will last, but at the time of this recording, it's been about 16 months. My God, friends, it's been 16 months. If you don't know how to share your screen yet, if you still have palm trees behind you or the Golden Gate Bridge and you think that's cute, it's not. It's just not professional. Or when you're on a call and 3 of the people of the 7 don't have their camera on because they just got back from the gym. Come on, friends. I just think we can be better. And I don't mean to be, overly scolding, but the question is, how do we get better? We get better by being better. Right. And by having real conversations. And the camera shouldn't be looking up your nose. It sounds basic, but it's not anymore, because we've all been on those excruciating calls. You know what a great Zoom call is? It's a conversation like you would on the phone. People are overly stiff. They're nervous about X or Y. Curate your background. For those who can't see, because it's audio, but Scott and I can see each other. I have my book strategically located here next to my head. My camera is eye level. I got a microphone close to me. And you know what? Now I don't have to think about any of those things. And you and I are having a great conversation. And when you're having a great conversation, imagine you're doing it on the phone. Zoom can be, or whatever platform you're using, it can be better for conversation, not as much for conferences, clearly, but for conversation, there isn't misinterpretation because we can see each other. Don't be afraid to smile. Don't worry that a cat walks across your screen,
right,
or that a kid is in the background. Between you and I love it. We have so humanized each other. When you see somebody doing a weathercast on TV and their kid walks in holding a bottle and hugs their leg, is that not the most endearing thing in the world?
Right. Like I was telling my colleague when she said that her kid is making noise in the background. This is a year ago. Is that okay? I'm like, absolutely. It means that the walls are coming down.
You need to stop thinking about the extraneous things. You know, in every conversation, we have two things going on in our head. We have content and context, right? The content is things that we're talking about, and the context is what's going on in the room and what are we looking at, are the extra sounds and everything else. And before we do a podcast, we try and eliminate all those things. We put our phones on vibrate. But the point is to be effective. And sometimes, I mean, Zoom calls and things like this aren't just to accommodate pandemics or other. We've learned in many cases we can expand our geographic reach in such a phenomenal way. But the people who are doing it effectively are the ones who are having authentic conversations, who turn everything else off and are conversing as if we were sitting across from each other at Starbucks.
Right.
And I think for the rainmakers of the world, I think you can be very impressive to your prospects because the bar is pretty darn low right now.
Right.
And if something's funny, laugh.
Right.
If something's, you know, I mean, instead of worrying that you look perfect or all these articles about the perfect suit to wear, or, you know what, be you, be professional, but lean in, be curious, have the same conversations you would. It's so uncomfortable for people to look at Cyclops. Right.
Yeah.
And so look at the camera. You can see the people out of the corner of your eyes. You don't need to be looking all over the thing. Have everything set up beforehand. It sounds basic at this point, but what it is an opportunity for competitive advantage. If you can do this better than others, then you have, we know that people buy from people they like and people they know and people they trust. And so it's been a real interesting learning curve, and not everybody has learned well to do this well on camera. We all prefer the face-to-face, in person, putting our feet under the same table and breaking bread. It's not always possible. Get good at this, and don't be afraid to be human or silly or, you know, doing the, hey, I'm on the phone right now. Sorry about that, just having fun with that kind of stuff.
Right.
I actually got one of those on-air lights. I just went on eBay or something, like at the radio station. And I actually have it mounted outside my office, and I flip the switch and it flashes red for on air. So my kids know that daddy's on the phone or daddy's on a Zoom call or something else. And I think there's some real positives. I think those who are good at this can really humanize themselves. And what's better in terms of a trusting relationship and client business generation than authenticity?
Absolutely right, David. So let me ask you this. If you could kind of summarize and give us, I always say, what are 3 action steps people can take to really integrate some of the concepts and ideas that you have? What would those be? If we were looking at 3 steps people can take to really face the future with uncertainty and still be able to sell and do business development effectively, what would
the 3 things that I teach when I'm on stage or I'm consulting with clients or doing a full day? First and foremost, you have to eliminate points of friction. If you are hard to get a hold of, if you have a contact form instead of a phone number or contact, you ever go to a website and there's literally no phone number, there's no way to reach them. They've made a conscious decision that they're not going to let their customers call them, and they've opted for efficiency. So number 1, eliminate those points of friction, things that delay somebody. If somebody has to wait 45 minutes on hold, they're not going to do it today. Yeah, if there's things that you don't offer that others do that facilitate speed and access, today being faster is better than being better. People opt for that. So number 1, walk your path, walk your customer's path, and expedite. Take a 12-step process, put everybody in a room and say, don't walk out of there until you've reduced it to 7 steps. to get people what they want faster. So number one, eliminate those points of friction. Number two is you really have to do a deeper dive into your ideal client. Who is our perfect client? You know, the old 20-80 rule, right? 20% of our customers or clients are going to constitute 80% of our revenue. What's your 90-10? Who is your ideal customer? And what's changed in their world? Have a conversation as a team. What do they need to make a decision? What do they hate about our industry? And how many of those things are we guilty of? Right? What do they fear in terms of saying yes to us or ending a current relationship with a vendor to say yes to us? Understand your ideal customer and what's changed. What are their priorities today? And the final thing is what you and I have touched on, which is we have to create space for conversation. If you make it difficult for your customers to complain or your clients to express dissatisfaction, they will go to your competitors. They will complain online and let everybody else know. And so we used to talk about in basic guest relations philosophy, the average person with a positive experience will tell 2 or 3 people, but somebody with a negative experience will tell 10. Right. None of that's true anymore. Today, we tell thousands.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Millions. We've got to create structured space for internal conversations and make it easy for our customers to contact us, give them an off-ramp from that AI chatbot to speak to a real person if they need to. Because the biggest challenge is the ones you don't know about or didn't hear about. And most customers don't complain. They just go somewhere else. And today, those who do complain, they do it online. And the internet is forever.
Well, David, I want to thank you for being here. You've got a wealth of knowledge. We're going to put all your links on our show notes. Anybody that's listening, if you want to reach out to David, you can go to the show notes and reach him. But tell us about the offerings that you have. What are the things that you have in terms of your offerings that you'd like our listeners to know about?
Well, I speak and consult. I speak on customer experience. I do full day workshops and others to sort of take people some of these exercises. And you can learn about me, and it'll be in the show notes as well at David Avrin, AVRIN, davidavrin.com. What I'm really excited about is this initiative that I think is the most impactful work I've ever done. It's called the Customer Experience Advantage Morning Huddle. And literally, it's a structured way to encourage those conversations internally. People start morning meetings and then they either devolve into complaint sessions or nobody has anything to talk about. This is a structured, short conversation that I lead every week. It's a different video. It's a different challenge. It's not motivation. It's some hard conversations that you don't want to wait till you have a problem with a customer before you figure out what you're going to do about it. But I'd love you to take a look at it. There's some sample videos and others. If you go to morninghuddlemembership.com, I think it can be transformational for organizations, and I'm really proud of the work.
That's great, David. We'll make sure to put that link on the show notes as well. Thank you for being here today. I'm sure we'll have you back on in the future, David.
Thank you, my friend. I hope to see you on the road.
Thank you for listening to the Rainmaking Podcast. For more information about our recruiting services for international law firms, visit our website at attorneysearchgroup.com. To inquire about having Scott speak at your next convention, conference, sales meeting, or executive retreat, visit therainmakingpodcast.com.